We've all seen emotional videos of our men and women in the military coming home to their families. What we don't see are the challenges they face as they transition back to normal life. In our new series, Coming Home, we follow the lives of our nation's bravest as they return from war. Over 15,000 American service members are stationed in Afghanistan more than 16 years after the U.S. involvement there began. Of the 2.7 million men and women who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, more than half were deployed at least twice. Jan Crawford spoke with 3 Marines who recently returned home. Jan, good morning.
Good morning. You know, less than 10% of Americans have served in the military, and this conflict may have faded from a lot of people's memories. So we talked with 3 Marines about their experiences and what it's like when they come back home.
The images never get old. The joy, love, and relief of coming home. For the Marines of Task Force Southwest, the sacrifices to get to this moment started almost a year ago when they arrived in Helmand Province.
Excited to assume this mission.
Captain Tamara Watkins and Majors Paul Rivera and Ethan Crumnow were part of the 1st Marine unit to set foot in the region since combat operations ended there in 2014. With 13 overseas deployments between them, these 3 are from very different backgrounds. A Texas transplant with more than 20 years' experience. A Wisconsin family man who's flown missions in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And a logistics officer who joined ROTC during college in Florida, part of the roughly 8% of the Corps that's female. All 3 have felt a similar call to serve.
I always wanted to be in the military. I joined the reserves after high school.
Started with a childhood dream.
The purpose of their most recent mission in one of the country's bloodiest regions was to help Afghan forces regain the upper hand over the Taliban.
Somebody says, why are we still in Afghanistan? What do you say?
In simplest terms, because they need our help and we have the capacity to do it.
And after 9 months, it was time to go home. A days-long journey to Camp Lejeune.
I want to cry, I want to scream, I just want to hold him.
Where anxious families were waiting.
Welcome home, Daddy.
Our cameras followed the meticulous process of their 4-hour re-entry, overseen by Watkins.
We know whose stuff this is?
Then an hour-long bus ride full of anticipation.
I've been staring at the same 9-month-old photos of them, so I think it'll really sink in, like going to pick them up.
This is the first deployment that they actually remember. It was challenging sometimes.
We had our breakdown moments every once in a while, of course, but we handled it.
And finally, the moment.
I can see him!
I saw them as the bus pulled up. They were standing there, they made a sign and stuff like that. Our son, he couldn't get over the sound of my voice.
I said, why does your voice sound like that? So that's what it always sounds like, buddy.
We've heard you
Only on the phone.
Yeah.
When you're that small, 9 months is, like almost a quarter of his life.
What was the hardest thing to miss these past 9 months?
The hugs. That's something I didn't really remember missing.
That feeling.
That feeling that, you can actually touch them now.
You guys ready to go watch Star Wars too?
Yeah.
But before they could settle in, the Marines must first brief their superiors in Washington.
Here's what we did, here's what we saw. There's some value added to hear it straight from the source.
We sat down with them inside the Pentagon while their mission was still fresh.
I think you just have to look at the big picture as a whole. What we do on the small level affects everything that is much larger.
Their service has meant missing milestones of their lives.
Happy anniversary, honey.
Hi, Dad. Happy birthday.
In 2010, Crumnow was stationed overseas when his wife gave birth to their first baby girl.
She was 7 months pregnant when I left, so that was rough. Like, you just feel like I'm not holding up my end of the deal. You're gonna have to do this on your own.
Your feet hit American soil, and then there's a baby.
Yeah. There's a little adjustment there, right, because I'm basically a stranger.
How do you re-enter their lives and become their dad again?
The biggest thing is that mom's been running the show for 9 months. You're now there, and mine do look at me. As soon as mom starts, hey, you guys need to get this done, I'll pop my head around the corner, and then they kind of see me, and then they're like, ooh, Dad's there now.
Even without children, a return to regular life is an adjustment.
I think I spent 2 hours the first time I went into the grocery store. I walked as slow as possible. I looked at every item.
2 colors smoke, everything but TC.
It's like gym, work, sleep, eat. And that's like the 4 things for 9 months. So when you come back, you have all these things you can do, almost to an overwhelming extent.
As active duty Marines, all 3 could deploy again.
Nobody's excited to leave their family,
but you also know that if there is a job that has to be done, you kind of want to be the one to get called up for it.
That's the attitude, right? I mean, if there's a job, you guys are ready to do it.
Absolutely.
And the next time that call comes, the promise of coming home will sustain them.
If you just take a step back off to the sidelines for a second and watch everyone else receive their family in that moment, it is like genuinely one of the happiest times.
Now, after a short break, the journey will continue for these 3 Marines. Captain Watkins plans to move to California, where the Marines will help her get a master's degree in operational analysis. And Major Crumnow will rejoin his unit in North Carolina, where he'll go back to flying. Major Rivera will soon get new orders that will probably mean he and his family will have to pack up and relocate. And we'll be checking back in to see what the next few months will look like for all of these 3 Marines.
They have to come up with a whole new emotional architecture for being back at home. When the father said, "I'm a stranger," that's
and like the child, his kid didn't even recognize his voice because he'd heard him on Skype. You know.
Yeah. And 2 hours in the grocery store. All the choices arrayed before you. Jan, this is a great story. If this story touched you like it touched all of us here, please let us know on Twitter. You can find us at CBS This Morning. Use the hashtag #ComingHomeCTM to share your own coming home story or tell us about someone you love. We'll be right back.